There is a particular word that I always try to guard against being accused of. I don't always succeed, but I try. You know what that word is? Mansplaining. Does anybody know what mansplaining means? Which is a very mansplaining question to ask. Would someone like to give a definition that is not me, and preferably not a male, of what mansplaining is? And I gotta get the flaw out of you, so.
Okay, so mansplaining is when a male member of the population explains in minute detail something that's blazingly obvious to a female.
when a member of the male population explains something in minute detail, what is blatantly obvious to a woman, or that she already knows, that sort of thing, or she just said it, but no, he has to make sure that he says it himself. And generally condescending, yes. What, Chip?
Is this going to turn into man bashing?
No. No, it's just a good reminder for us. No, oddly enough, mansplaining, I think, is a potentially well-intentioned but really bad distortion of what it means to be a teacher. One of the challenges I face as an avid teacher is the fact that I want to try to over-explain everything to make sure it's as clear as possible. Sometimes ends up becoming more mansplaining than actually teaching. Also, one of the challenges of being a teacher is that I'm not an expert in anything, but it's easy to, number one, be thought of as an expert in something, and number two, to come across as an expert in something. Anyone who's a teacher could probably relate to that. It's also a big kind of to the ego when someone points out something to you when you know a lot about the subject and completely smashes what you're saying as wrong or outdated or incorrect or problematic. So in all of these things, there's a common element that I think that James points to very well in the epistle this week. If you're going to be a teacher, you gotta be willing to be wrong. Never assume that you know everything there is to know on a topic. That is a guaranteed way to make a big fool of yourself. I know! I've seen me do it! Also, if you are a teacher, those of you who are teachers know this, you are held to a higher standard, whether that standard is fair or justified or not. And that is one of the challenges of professing to try to help other people better understand things. Now, if you're not a teacher and you don't know a lot about something, it's all the more of a reason not to pretend like you know a lot about that thing. And there's an important need, I think, to challenge James that teachers and students have a much more reciprocal relationship than the sage on the stage approach. And I think James is addressing the fact that so many who claim to be teachers, like Paul, get up on their soapbox and go on and on and on and on and on in this insufferable, somewhat arrogant, know-it-all way of teaching things. My favorite is Paul when he goes around and saying, I'm so humble. Can I tell you how humble I am? And I don't know anything, but let me tell you all the details so you know exactly what to know. Now, does that remove Paul from being relevant or important? Absolutely not. Is he fun to make fun of, though, because of it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You might have noticed that the wisdom passage this week was both ooh and at the same time. When Lynn was helping me put together the bulletin this week, she was like, "Are you sure you want to use that passage?" And I'm like, yes, I am, and I understand the pushback. I don't like the idea of wisdom laughing at and mocking people's calamities. But one of the challenges that we're facing right now is the embodiment of that unfortunate truth in our world, because we have so many people who claim to know so much more than they actually do, claim to have all the answers, and manipulate people into bizarre conspiracy theories, bizarre political leanings, bizarre mistrust of good science, bizarre lack of interest in actually trying to listen to anyone who has a different perspective from themselves. Wisdom is saying, yo, you need to slow down. You need to listen to many sources. Think critically. Question your authorities. Not to dismiss them, but to make sure that your authority is trustworthy. Now, I don't care what perspective you hold, which side of the political aisle you find yourself on. Anyone who's trying to tell you how you should think about what you believe is a dangerous teacher, because they are not actually teaching, they're trying to manipulate. This is something that James is pointing out to us. Simplicity as a human being is not a bad thing. In fact, I've found that some of the most profound wisdom comes from people who do not have higher education. They've never heard the word philosophy other than in passing, but are absolute exemplars of the wisdom of God. I have seen people who teach philosophy, who are world-renowned in this field, who are absolutely foolish, and vice versa. But the key here is to reflect. The key here is to listen. To not assume that any of us has a definitive answer on anything. To not assume that anyone in any authority, whether they're wearing robes, whether they're wearing funny hats that are mortars, doesn't matter. We have a mutual relationship that we need to build together. And the hope is that we learn also from Peter's mistake, who opens mouth, inserts foot, and then later discovers. He speaks first, then learns later. That he thought he understood what was important about Jesus' ministry. I would never want to have Jesus call me Satan. But it means the accusing attorney in heaven. But he's saying, Peter, you're missing the point. You don't know what you're talking about. And it doesn't mean that you don't have good reason for the value that you have. But I'm trying to help you understand there's new information. There's a new perspective, a new way of doing things that God is trying to put into us through wisdom that you need to listen to. It was funny this morning. I walked in, and Carol Silva, one of our newest members, who is here in person and who was singing in our choir, handed me a poem she wrote. Carol, is it okay if I use your poem? It fits perfectly with today's sermon. The importance of listening and self-reflection, which as a goofy George the Great White Shark, a fortune teller in Morro Bay, reminded me, self-reflection is key. I'd like you to close with this poem by Carol Silva. Inside the book. Some say when you see the cover of the book, you will know what is inside. They're sure they know the person by the color of their eyes. Have you ever listened to someone you just met and heard what was said? Have you ever looked into their eyes to see what's in their head? Have you ever really paid attention to understand their soul? Have you ever really noticed how life has taken its toll? If you sadly had to answer no, then take another look to see inside the person and not just the cover of the book. And the big car says, Amen.